Hi, welcome to TWC's Digital Leadership Series with our collaborator, Salih, Sheikh. This is our second episode where we're formally going through the digital journey, and today we are going to talk about commercialisation. So, hi Salih.
Hi Tanya, how are you doing?
I'm great, thank you. Well, thank you for last week where we talked about infrastructure. And so this week we're going to move on to how to make digital pay, but also I guess the less exciting piece about how much digital costs. So are you ready for this?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, it seems like a perfect lead on from the talk about infrastructure. It's got to make business sense, or why do it in the first place?
Yeah, totally. So, yeah, I guess for me, we're talking about cost versus return. And I guess there's some key considerations to think about, like there's a lot of wholesalers at the moment who have already got some kind of app. So should we start with that, kind of thinking about, how you're going to fit into the market?
Yeah, I mean, I guess like the world has changed a lot from, kind of 10 years ago or so. And now, whilst there's a lot of, I imagine there's a lot of people who are looking to, have a website or have an app just for the sake of having it. I guess the key thing to remember is that it's no longer a differentiator. It's now, if you've got 3 wholesalers around you who've got an app, and then you decide to create an app, you're not going to suddenly attract a whole load of new customers because you've got an app. You're going to have to do something that goes over and above what they've got on their app. You're going to have to innovate it, and it kind of goes back to what we were talking about with infrastructure last week. You've got to make sure it suits the purpose for what your customers need, and you have to build it so that using infrastructure that is kind of open-ended infrastructure, but then allowing you to build on top of that, not hugely complex, but certain features or functions in partnership with your kind of digital partner, that will give you a bit of differentiation versus the customer, and versus your competitors. And the reason why that's so important is, otherwise what will end up happening is you'll suddenly see digital sales, go up, which is great. However, what you won't realize is it's happening at the expense of your sales in cash and carry, or in your depot. So all you'll end up doing is cannibalizing your sales because you're not attracting any new customers, and your current customers are probably finding it more convenient to shop online. And as a result, what return have you made? You haven't. You've probably just cost yourself more, because the cost of serving a customer through digital is going to be much higher than serving a customer who comes into depot, picks the order themselves, and delivers it to them to their own shop.
Yeah, absolutely. So in essence, it is thinking through, you might want to offer your existing customers more convenience, or to keep up with what your competitors are doing so that therefore you're in line with the common offering. But if you only do that, you are likely adding costs to your business. Is that right?
Yeah, correct. So it's really, in terms of, I know the idea kind of behind this episode that we discussed was to almost give people what they might need in terms of building a business case, and how they go about approaching that. And so for that reason, it's really, really important that the very first thing that you think about is, what do customers want? Always start with the customer. Right? It's one of the things I always bang on about, but customer at the heart. So what is it that your customers already have access to? What is it your competitors' customers already have access to? And what is it that what is it that you can give them over and above that? What are things that will make their lives easier? So if you use the Best Ways kind of digital offering as an example, when we were kind of innovating what we had available on the app and the website, there were 2 or 3 things that we kind of updated. So if you looked at the website back then, kind of 4 or 5 years ago, it hadn't changed from when we first launched it. And so what we started to look at was, we started to listen to some of the customer feedback and understand some of the things that would really help them. And the very first thing was, first of all, we had food service customers shopping off a wholesale app, so or a wholesale website, sorry, I should say. So we knew straight away we needed to have a more bespoke offering for food service customers and also for our pet customers. And then the second thing that we looked at was, we had a lot of feedback around something we mentioned last week about being able to people who wanted to be able to start their order on on the website and then finish it off on the app, or vice versa. So people obviously very busy. You might start building an order while you're behind the counter in your store, and a customer comes in, and then you have to stop what you're doing. Or you might be someone who's used to kind of building lists, like writing a list down, and and going and when you're sorry, and then a customer walks in, and then again you've stopped what you're doing, and you might not remember until later you've got to finish that order. So as a result, we then built that, and these kind of features purely came from purely went into kind of the business case for why we should spend the money on innovating that app. So having that key point of differentiation, and ensuring that it's stuff that customers really want and it would make their lives easier, that is always a place to start.
And I guess that if you are at this stage just looking at, okay, I've got my existing customer base to serve, I need to make it as easy as possible for the customer, because that's my job, and that's how I will retain their business. We've accepted that that might drive up your cost of service if you take that approach. But I guess the next step on with the kind of things you're talking about is that your objective then is to make shopping so straightforward for that customer that you're driving up their spend and the amount of times they shop with you. So frequency of spend, average spend, etc., increases as a result of the fact that you've created a better model for the customer.
Yeah, definitely. So, I guess, if you start with the customer and what sort of things would be helpful, useful for the customer, then the next step is trying to figure out, right, what's that going to, by building these things, by spending the money on these things, A, what's it going to cost, first of all, but B, what's the return going to be? What is that feature going to help me drive? Is it going to bring new customers in? So what will that be worth to the business? How much do we anticipate that could bring to the business? Is it a feature that will help customers to increase their average order value? Or is it a feature that will help them to shop more often? So those are really the three metrics, right? So is it attracting new customers? Is it attracting existing customers to spend more, or is it attracting existing customers to come in more often?
Yeah.
And so those are almost the three key metrics next to have a look at. There's the cost, and then what is the purpose of these features that I'm building, and therefore what's it going to return to the business.
So if we look at attracting new customers in, accepting that we've dealt with our existing business and we're trying to optimize the experience for our current customers, we can then look at, can we bring new customers in? So I guess in that, there's kind of two obvious options. You may, I guess, get incremental customers because you've suddenly created a better shopping experience than your competitor. So therefore, you might attract new local business. But the obvious is actually, do I want to slightly change my business model and expand my horizons? So that could, I guess, be new geographies, or it could be new customer types, even through selling through Amazon Marketplace, setting up some kind of PBU offering. I guess there's that as an option as well.
Yeah, and I guess, using that as an example, so you come back to the same question, I guess, right? So start with a customer. What is it that what is it that I'll be able to offer customers? Or what is it, as even actually a step before that, is what do I feel as a business I need to be offering customers? So the step one is, using the geography example, is I might be looking at my business and being like, I feel like I've got a good hold of the customer base around me. I want to expand my horizons, as you say, and give customers beyond my immediate vicinity the opportunity to shop with me. So okay, if that's what your goal is, then right, the next thing you think is, right, how am I going to do that? I'm going to do that through they're going to have some way of shopping without coming into the depot. Therefore, there's my decision to build a website or an app. But then the next question is, right, now that I've done that, how am I going to attract those customers? Because those customers, undoubtedly, in this day and age, will already have access to a website and an app from another wholesaler, or will be using things like Amazon Marketplace, as you say. So what are you then going to offer? Then get into the nub of it, go and speak to customers, start to understand what is the frustrations they have with the current digital offering they've got. And what are the items that would be really useful? So again, going back to best way days, I mean, one of the ones I remember we found out pretty quickly was the scanner and building the scanner in. So one of the most cumbersome processes for retailers when we spoke to them was building their list of stock they need to go and order next time they're in depot. So I mean, there were two things. So one was we kind of built in this scanner where we realized that if they just scan the product barcode, we could add it straight to their basket much quicker than them having to write down a long code. And then the other one is we actually built the ability to kind of build personalized lists into our website and app as well. So all of now they might have a weekly shop that they just do every week, and they could literally write it down and build it as a list, on our website and our app, and then reorder that list literally at the click of a button. So it's so much quicker than them having to write a list down, use a piece of paper, have to write another list down, and the amount of time that you take them in the store. So I guess to come back to the point, like it's like putting the customer at the heart, understanding what the pain points of the customer are, and then finding and finding out how you can make their life easier. That's got to be the starting point for any rationale for why you would create any sort of digital offering.
Yeah, that kind of ties back into two buzzwords that I hear a lot, and that I don't think you always fully understand what they mean when they're not in context. So the first is kind of frictionless trading. And I was reflecting on this the other day as I was placing my Amazon order, that actually, I only had to click on the Amazon URL, find my product and hit buy, and that was it. So it was 2 clicks and it was all done. So I guess that's the first thing, is that ease of transaction. So that becomes totally frictionless. And then the other one is personalization, where the things you've talked about, from the customer perspective, they feel quite straightforward. Again, I guess using the Amazon example, they know who I am, they know what I've bought previously, they make it easy for me to find the things that I'm likely to want to buy. And so that personalization piece, there's quite a lot of work that goes on in the back end to make that happen. But if you haven't got it, the customer notices immediately, because it's just a transactional, functional website that doesn't do anything particularly clever, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. You've not built anything that, frankly, in this day and age is in any way kind of useful or groundbreaking in comparison to what's already out there. So you've got to bear in mind the context that if it was 10 years ago, or even I think we released our app 6-7 years ago, if it was then and you were building an app, fine, then you'd probably be all right with that. When we first built our, when we built our first app, there wasn't really anyone else in the market who had an app. So yeah, it was for what, now that you look back on it, it was just a basic shopping app. That's all it was. It didn't have many other features on it. So it was only, like I say, kind of 2-3 years ago, when we started to look at what the app, what was on the app, and we assessed the market and looked around us and saw that there are other people who had apps now, and we had to really start thinking about, right, it's not enough just to have this app or this website. It applies to website as well. Now we've got to figure out, how do we innovate this to not only to service our existing customers better, but also to give other customers a reason to come and shop with us as well. I think one of the key things from a business case perspective, I guess, is what is it that your business is trying to achieve at a macro level. And I remember one of the conversations that we were having at the beginning of my time at Bestway is that it's not enough really just to be renowned for price. Let me rephrase that slightly. So it's okay to be renowned just for price, and then completely kind of your entire business and the way it functions and the whole business model is then catered towards that, and delivering price. Or the alternative is that, and this is where we kind of got to, is that there's got to be something beyond price now, because price is something that everyone in the market had played on at that point for years. And so we started to look at, and if you look at people like Booker and Bidfood and Breaks, and it's exactly the same, they've done exactly the same thing. They've differentiated not based on price anymore, but based on service. and that, you know, you've got to have a point of difference, and that was the point of difference that they, you know, that they started. But the starting point was that for that, sorry, was looking at a really macro level, you know, in 3, 4, 5 years, what do we want our business to be doing, and what sort of business do we want to be, and who do we want to be going after from a customer base perspective. And then, you know, that should then filter down through pretty much every business decision you make. So, you know, that's almost after the customer, or maybe just before the customer, actually, is probably the most important starting point, is what do we want to achieve as a business, and then going and finding out from customers, you know, how do we get them to that place? Like, what is it that's frustrating them? What stops them from, you know, from helping us as a business get to that place?
Yeah, because I guess, yeah, what I'm hearing, and I think we've talked about this before, it's okay to be a price-focused wholesaler, as in that is your reason for being. I mean, all wholesalers are price-focused. Yeah. I've been in this industry long enough.
Yeah. I'm definitely not telling people to put their prices up 50%. I don't think that's going to achieve a lot for them.
We're going to achieve headlines from this conversation, I can feel. It's okay that your central tenet as a wholesaler is that you want to have the lowest price on a case, but actually, if that is your business model, if that's why you're in business, then in essence you have to strip your service back. This is a bit like the discounters, isn't it? If we use an analogy of retail, Aldi and Lidl have stripped their margin out so that they can be cheapest on display, but in which case you don't get the frills, and the consumer understands that. That's the quid pro quo. And I guess it has to be the same in wholesale, that, you know, there are customers who are going to drive 150 miles for £1 off a case of beer, but there are others who actually want something more, and in that instance, that's where you have a business model where you need to start looking at things like service.
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely think the market also has shifted. You know, we always forget, I think, within this industry, that the retailers, the food service operators, they are also consumers. They're also just normal everyday consumers. So their behavior in the consumer world informs very much their behavior in terms of how they shop. It's, you know, it lags a bit. It's not quite, you know, as quick as if they're doing something in the consumer world. They probably won't start to pick up on that habit in the way that they operate their business till, you know, a few months later, because I guess they're just used to doing their business stuff in a particular way. But yeah, they're also still just normal everyday consumers. So it's really important to, like, when you start to look at the market, I mean, this is certainly what we looked at a few years ago, is that you're right, there will always be people who are just kind of, all they care about is getting that £1 off their beer case, right? And it's okay, I think, to be a wholesaler that has a business model that entirely caters towards them, that strips back service, exactly as you said. However, I definitely, the gut feel I had when I was looking around and speaking to customers and knowing that there was a new generation coming through of retailers, of food service operators, etc., was that it feels very much like people are moving towards having a more service-orientated relationship with their business rather than just a price one. Service certainly is a thing that really allows you to build a relationship that perhaps ensures that your customer is going to keep coming back. So actually, you know, we made this call that we wanted to start to move towards a service model. We didn't abandon having good pricing, but we started to move towards a service model. And obviously, there's cost that comes with servicing customers better, and you've then just got to account for that, you know, in terms of your business model. So I think, you know, the starting point, like we say, get really clear on what sort of business you want to be, whether that be now or whether that be also with an eye on where you want to get to in 5 years. And then build whatever you're going to build from a digital perspective around that. And don't build it based on what you want now, and then find in 2-3 years time you've then got to spend a whole load of money to rebuild it.
I think you've just touched on a really important point that, in my view, I think it's occasionally discussed across the sector in my experience, but it's not a general topic of conversation at the moment, but it is that conundrum And to be fair, they've had it in retail as well. The consumer starts to expect more, or the retailer and caterer in our context starts to expect more, but they're unwilling to pay for delivery, or they're unwilling to pay for that added service. And so the danger with digital is this very careful balancing act, isn't it, of understanding the incremental cost that you're loading in and how your margin is being eroded, and then calculating how you're going to recover that. I mean, I don't think I'm saying anything terribly controversial when I point out that the wholesalers that have struggled over recent years have been the ones that have been delivered only. You know, where we've lost businesses in the sector, that's been the area that's been pinched. So, I mean, it's a real challenge, isn't it, trying to get this right?
Yeah, and look, it's probably the biggest challenge in some ways. That I remember it's one of the longest ongoing discussions I think that we had as a team at Best Way. It's a really difficult thing to get right, and it's really difficult. You know, it's difficult because I don't think the retailers have still got it right. You've just got to. I mean, look, the numbers do all the talking, right? So it's perfectly fine to decide that you want to offer delivery, and only you as a business can accept kind of at what cost. So, you know, are you prepared? You know, are you prepared? Is service if service is so important for you, and something that you really want to offer and a differentiator with kind of other wholesalers around you, at what cost are you willing to do that? You know, are you okay to do that if it means you're not making money? It's just, you know, cost neutral, for example. Obviously, if you're losing money, I'd probably advise, you know, against it unless you're making that up elsewhere. But it's a really difficult one, and kind of every business almost needs to look at it individually themselves as to is there a way of structuring it that my customers will accept and that will ensure I don't make a loss. The biggest problem, I guess, is that, you know, again, link it back to the consumer world. Look how easy it has become for consumers to get delivery, and how cheap it has become, and it's the same expectation. I mean, I think one of the big drivers around it was Amazon initially had they had a charge if it was under £15, and above £15 it was free delivery, and that almost set a kind of benchmark across both retail and even to an extent wholesale. Like, people were basically expecting free delivery, and it's not viable. And I think everyone's woken up to the fact that it's not viable to be offering free delivery, and you need to find ways of, you know, clever ways. I've seen things in retail, for example, where you premium price certain delivery slots, or you know, there are ways to kind of drive some money out of delivery to cover your costs, and you just got to think really cleverly about a way of doing it without really upsetting your customers. The sad reality is, or maybe not the sad reality, it's a good thing, but it's just, you know, makes life more complex. But the reality is that it's not a differentiator to be able to be offering delivery. Really, it's like a given that you should be delivering. How you go about structuring that commercially is something you've got to, you know, you got to stay close to your customers, look at what the competitors are doing, look at what the guys in retail are doing, and see if you can find a solution that sits nicely somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, I guess there's kind of two imperatives that drive that calculation on delivered cost. I guess the one is what your immediate competitors are doing, because unfortunately that creates a market expectation, good or bad. And then the second, for me, that I've increasingly found as a consumer, is that where I will pay willingly is where there is great convenience, and you start to calculate the cost of your time, if you like. Now, you know, I guess not every consumer will do that, but certainly in a retailer's position, how long am I going to be away from my store? You know, how long is it taking me to place an order and then walk around the cash and carry, etc.? If actually they can save that time and that time away from the store, then that suddenly becomes, you know, a worthy calculation of investing in a delivered slot.
Yeah, and look, this is as much a marketing problem actually as it is a digital or a commercial problem, because the next stage is, like, talk to your customer in those terms, exactly what you've just said, right? Talk to them about, look, by you getting this delivered, it's going to cost you this much with us. However, the amount of money it will save you, or the amount of money you could end up making through upselling by spending that hour in the store would be this much. So it kind of, you know, covers, you know, talk to them in real terms in terms of cost benefit as well, because they'll understand that, right? They're businessmen. So rather than just, in some ways putting on a delivery charge and explaining, the kind of a common way of doing it at the moment is we're putting on a delivery charge. The reason is, the cost of servicing is high, and it will mean that we'll be able to bring you X, Y, and Z, and improve your life. But there's another way that I don't think I've seen anyone really talk about it, which is this is what the cost. This is what it's going to benefit. This is how much it's going to benefit you from a cost perspective in terms of convenience. I haven't really seen anyone talk about it like that, and that might be something that customers really understand. It's rather than just being like, oh, this will allow us to give you X feature and Y feature through our digital platform. It really actually, how does it impact me as a customer? What's the benefit I get? Well, the benefit I get is convenience. If I have to pay for that convenience, tell me how like this service makes up for the cost that I'm having to put into it. So if you can somehow start to calculate, like this is what it costs for the amount of time you're away from a store, and add kind of fuel, add like all those elements to it, you might actually get to a really interesting communication point of being able to advertise that this is the cost to you of shopping in depot, and this is the cost you of having it delivered, and therefore this delivery charge hopefully comes in well under the cost to you for getting it delivered.
And I guess another interesting metric, actually, we talked about you wanting to stretch average spend and frequency of shops so that you're increasing the amount your customer is spending with you, which then offsets the cost. So another way that you can use the delivery charge actually is to stretch that spend. So if you've done some basket analysis or trolley analysis, as I like to call it in wholesale, on your average trolley size and how frequently customers are shopping with you can do some quite clever calculations actually for the customer that's shopping every 2 weeks, get them to shop every week and they can have a free delivery kind of thing. Or for the customer who's always spending, I don't know, £450, get them to spend £600, or and small incremental steps that actually you're up weighting what they spend, but they're getting a reward in free delivery.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing is just like, if you can test it with like your most loyal customers, right? Offer it as a service that is only available to your best customers, and see what the impact is. Because I definitely think that the habit that starts to build up is people start to do one large shop through delivery, and they will still come into depot once or twice a week to top up. So what you might have, without realizing what the impact it might end up having by offering delivery, is actually you do end up increasing kind of maybe not average order value, but your average almost like weekly value, if that makes sense. So the amount of money I spend with the business in a week, as opposed to on each shop, because I'm therefore because basically end up almost the topping up is almost like the additional bit on top of their kind of normal shop. It's so you might find there are behaviors that by testing it and observing it first, you might find there are some positive behaviors that are beneficial to the business. You might find the opposite, but if you can test it first, and you can really start to figure out like, okay, I've got some data now that I can kind of apply to the rest of my customer base, and therefore I can start to figure out what sort of cost versus benefit I'm going to get by introducing this service.
Yeah, and I guess it's starting to break down business cost in different ways. I mean, in order to be a superb wholesaler, you've got to be able to calculate net cost, which is not always the simplest thing in my experience.
No. Yeah.
And I mean, that's hard enough, but actually then to overlay things like cost of serve, but actually in order to survive and thrive through a digital journey, you really need to be able to do that, don't you?
Yeah, and there are all aspects of cost you've got to think about. So there's for example, if you're offering delivery or click and collect, there's costs in terms of picking, right? It's not just as simple as now the customer's not going around and picking their own stock. You're having to employ people who are going to pick it. So what's the cost of that? So and that actually then links into the next point, which is then people, right? Like then figure out what is it you're going to need. So now in your business case, you've got to this point where like, this is where we want to be as a business. These are some of the as a result, we've decided we want to we've listened to our customers, and we think it'll be useful for us to build a website or an app that allows more customers to be able to shop with us. in order to make ourselves different, these are the features, having spoken to customers and listened to them, these are the features that we want to bring in. And then the next question is, right, how much is all of this going to cost? And so there's the direct costs, which is the building of the infrastructure, et cetera. And then there's the indirect costs, which is, like I say, which is like the people cost. So in order to deliver this, what is it that I'm going to need? How big a team am I going to need? How many people am I going to have to employ? What's the cost going to be of not even direct employment? So what's the cost going to be of working with a partner to help me build this infrastructure, for example? So you then need to start to build in all those costs, and to really give you like a holistic view of exactly what the cost is going to be to the business, or maybe not exactly, but roughly what the cost is going to be to the business, because only then can you work out what the cost versus return is going to be.
And it's fair to say, I mean, you need to accrue a team, and you're going to, both internal staff and potentially outsource providers. There's going to be a period of build and testing and piloting, etc. So actually payback from a digital initiative will take some time, won't it? I mean, that feels to me like you're talking year 2, year 3 to really start to recover any investment.
Yeah, I mean, again, it depends on, I guess, what you're building. So if you're building an app, then you're probably right. If you're building a feature on your existing kind of app website, then yeah, it might pay back a bit quicker. But yeah, I mean, again, nicely that leads on to the next thing that you need to look at. The next thing you need to look at is, right, what's the time scales? What are we going to achieve by when? When are we going to go live? What's our target date? And then also, as part of that, then you need to think about, right, what are my projections in terms of sales as a result, and therefore at what point am I going to break even, et cetera. So yeah, following on from what do I need, the next thing is, right, and how long is it going to take, based on, if and those things can go hand in hand. You might decide you want to put in, employ more people because it might speed it up. So you need to figure out what kind of makes sense from a cost perspective to your business. Then figure out, the timescales and how long it's going to take, and then that is that is what will help you figure out at what point you're going to make that make up for that cost. Yeah,
and I guess one of the things we talked about last week was the piece that you've said today, putting the customer at the heart of this. That digital is a means to an end; it's not an end in itself. So as a result of doing the planning, you've got to start with, where do I want this to be? Not sort of, I need an app, which is
exactly.
That's our new strap line.
Yeah. Well, it's just it comes back to what we were saying right at the beginning, right? It's a real misnomer. I think it's so easy when you look at it, when you kind of just look at it plain and simple, you're like, yeah, it'd be really cool. It'd be, I've seen other people around me have got a website. I've seen other people around me have got an app. We don't have one. I think it'd be really, like maybe we should have one as well. They seem to have lots of customers shopping through it. Therefore, it will help us to, bring in lots of customers and increase our revenue. But, like I say, look at it really analytically, because that is not what will happen in this day and age. I can almost guarantee what will happen is your existing customer base will switch to this, to having their stock, having it either click and collect or delivery managed through whatever digital platform you build. And all that will happen to you is you won't bring in any new business. You'll just be cannibalizing the business you've got. So it's really important to do the groundwork up front to understand what is the impact going to be. How am I going to offer something that is actually going to help me achieve what I need, which is to bring in new customers, or to increase average order value, or to get people to shop more frequently, or even to drive loyalty could be another one. So it's really important. And as I think then there's one last element that the next step actually is, so where am I going to get, so once you've kind of figured out what your costs are, the next thing is, what the timescales are, then like I say, it's forecasting, right? And what are the different ways I'm going to get income, and from where? So then there's, we've spoken a bit about, are these features going to attract new customers? How many new customers? What do we reckon the average spend of those customers is going to be? Existing customers, are they going to spend more? Are they going to shop more often? And how do I kind of roughly equate what that's going to bring to the business? And then the third way is, it becomes an advertising platform, right? So you've then got this ability, you can give suppliers and manufacturers the opportunity to advertise directly to their customers, which is something that any supplier or manufacturer would jump at the opportunity to do. So you can then start to allow them to advertise more directly, and if you build your platform really cleverly, you can even personalize it so that they're talking directly to the customers they want to talk to, rather than just generically to all customers. So the last bit is right. The last kind of area of monetizing it is ensuring that you've got opportunities for people to advertise through your marketplace directly to customers. So and that really, those are all the steps of the business case. So that should then give you a pretty robust business case to go back to your business with, and to understand whether it's whether it is the right thing to do as a business or not. And if the answer is no, really don't do it. Even if everyone else around you is doing it, don't do it, because unless it fits in with some sort of overall business plan and serves a purpose for customers, it would be foolish to spend a big amount of money on something like this.
Yeah, I just coming back to your piece about supplier support on e-commerce. It sounds like, oh wow, it's a new incremental revenue opportunity for me. I can get suppliers to invest in my online offering. The reality is, I think, as we all know, when a supplier is investing money, they expect a return off that, and they expect service. So the danger you have is if you can't actually meet the supplier's requirements, you are suddenly going to spend a huge amount of time trying to service that supplier. And then if you disappoint them, you'll lose their income anyway. So just be clear, if you're going to go into working with suppliers collaboratively online, that you can actually do what they want you to do. Otherwise.
No, I spot on. I think that's a really important point. And just, again, I guess ties into the purpose of this entire discussion today, which is just make sure you're prepared, right? And plan and prepare. It's not as simple as looking around you and seeing what other people are doing and then just trying to do the same thing, because like I say, it might look like, oh, their revenue's going up and so therefore ours will. In reality, it's not that simple. It's much more complex than that, and you could end up costing your business rather than actually benefiting it. So I guess, those to me seem like the most sensible steps in building a business case. Almost, so I guess in some ways, to summarize it, you start with what is the business trying to achieve, where do we think we need to get to, look at the macro trends within the market. Then the next thing is, right, what do customers need, what will customers need, listen to your customers, do the research, look at competitors, and find out, like we were saying, the big thing with that is, what is it that's going to give customers convenience, and what is going to be innovative above and beyond what is already existing in the marketplace. Then the next step after that is starting to understand, right, in order for me to be able to deliver those things, what's the cost going to be of building the infrastructure? What's the cost going to be? What are the direct costs? Then the next step is, what are the indirect costs? And what am I going to need in order to be able to do it? So people, team, third parties, etc., etc. And then look at, right, those are all the costs. What is it that I will be able to make from this? What are different revenue generators, and how much will they amass to? And sorry, somewhere in between that was timescales, which I've forgotten as well. So figure out how long it's going to take, and therefore when you're going to get a return. And like I say, then you've got your business case. That is a pretty robust business case to go back to your business with. But yeah, if there's one, I think you've said it. You said it a bit earlier on. Don't see digital as the be all end all. Digital is the enabler, so it must be enabling something, or else you need to ask yourself the question why you're doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like we've given a cautionary lesson today in the perils of digital, but actually, to be honest, it's why I first started talking to you, was because I kind of had this passionate view, and I seem to be a bit of a lone voice, that there were a lot of wholesalers going off on this journey that were risking wasting quite a lot of money, actually. And I feel like today's conversation gets at the heart of why that might be happening. So it's been tremendously useful. Thank you.
No, my pleasure. And, I think one example which we haven't mentioned, which we talked about before, is I know it must seem really difficult to have to innovate when everyone else is, when you're not the first mover. It must seem very difficult to have to innovate. But there's a great example kind of in front of us at the moment of a company that has done it. So Tanya, you brought up this brilliant example of Zoom. You know that like there have been things like Skype and FaceTime around for a long time, and for many years now. So it really, you would have, as a company like Zoom, you would have looked around. Perhaps the founders of Zoom might have looked around and been like, how are we going to compete with these guys? Because they've already been around for ages. They've got massive budgets, etc., etc. But Zoom have shown you exactly how to do it, right? Go and speak to your customers, understand what they need, and build something that is above and beyond what already exists. Don't just try and copy. If they had just tried to copy what Skype, etc., were doing, they probably wouldn't be anywhere near the size business that they've become. It's actually by really tailoring it and understanding what customers or consumers need, being really clear about that and building it with that in mind, that has helped them to really innovate. So I thought it was a brilliant example from you when we were speaking. So I just wanted to include that as well. It is possible to innovate, but just really, it comes from the customer. Always start with the customer and speak to the customer and understand what it is you can do to help them.
And build your point of difference.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, cool. Thank you so much. So I think next week we're going to be talking about people and culture. So probably one of the most important things in terms of guaranteeing success is having the right people around you. So I'm looking forward to that one.
Definitely. And actually, again, one of the ones that people don't really think about very often. It's a really key part. It's how you drive almost like the change across the business and the understanding across the business. So yeah, I think it'll be hopefully a really fruitful and useful discussion.
Brilliant, thank you. I feel like we should rename these the masterclasses. It's been fabulous. So thank you so much, and I look forward to speaking to you soon.
No, my pleasure. Take care.